I mistakenly sat in my sister-in-law Sable's chair at a family gathering. The moment she saw me, her face turned red with anger. She stormed over, glaring at me, and without warning, she slapped me hard across the face in front of everyone. My cheeks burned, not just from the slap, but from the humiliation of it happening with my whole family watching. My brother Merrick, who I always thought would have my back, shocked me by siding with her instead. In that instant, something inside me broke. I wanted revenge, and I decided to call the police to report the incident. But just before the police arrived, something unexpected happened. Something that completely changed how I saw the situation. My name is Lyra. I'm 25 years old and work as a marketing specialist in Dallas, Texas. I've always loved the city, with its busy streets, vibrant art, and close-knit community that makes you feel like you're part of something special. I have a cozy apartment here, and my job keeps me on my toes. I'm proud of the work I do, but even more than my job, the most important relationship in my life has always been with my younger brother, Merrick. Growing up, Merrick and I were like two peas in a pod. He was the little brother I'd always wanted, and we spent hours together in our own little world, building forts out of blankets, exploring the backyard, and creating imaginary adventures. As he got older, our bond grew even stronger. I never thought anything could come between us, not even when he started dating. When Merrick first introduced me to Sable, his girlfriend, I was genuinely happy for him. She seemed perfect for him, charming, funny, and engaging. I remember the day we first met her. It was at a family barbecue. Merrick's face lit up every time he talked to her, and I couldn't help but feel happy for him. "Lyra, you're going to love her," he had told me with so much excitement. "She's amazing." And that night, Sable lived up to everything Merrick had said. She had a way about her that drew people in. We laughed and shared stories, and for a while, I thought I had found a new friend. I felt so warm and content, knowing my brother was with someone who made him happy. But as time went by, things changed. At first, I brushed off my unease, thinking it was just me adjusting to sharing Merrick with someone else. However, Sable soon began to show a different side, one that was far from the warm, friendly person I'd met. During family gatherings, she'd make little remarks that stung. At first, I thought I was being overly sensitive, but her comments kept coming, and they weren't so innocent. One Thanksgiving, I brought my special pumpkin pie, a family recipe from our grandmother that I'd spent hours perfecting. When it was time for dessert, Sable looked at me with a smirk and said, "Oh, I thought I was supposed to bring dessert this year." She said it in a light tone, like it was no big deal, but her words made me feel embarrassed in front of everyone. I forced a smile and replied, "Must have slipped my mind," but I could feel my face burning with embarrassment. As the months went on, her comments only grew sharper. One evening at dinner, she turned to me with a smirk and said, "Still single, Lyra? You should really try dating someone. It might help with your personality." Her words felt like a slap to my confidence. I tried to laugh it off, pretending it didn't bother me, but inside, it hurt. I started feeling more and more isolated, as if she was chipping away at my place in the family. One night, I opened up to my best friend, Zevin, while we were out for coffee. "Zevin, something feels wrong with Sable," I said, nervously stirring my drink. At first, I thought she was great. Now, she's just different. Different how? Zevin asked, looking at me closely. "She makes these comments that feel like she's insulting me, even if she says them like a joke. It's like she's trying to push me out of my own family." I felt a wave of frustration rise as I spoke. "Have you told Merrick about it?" he asked. I hesitated, thinking of how deeply Merrick cared about her. I don't want to cause any problems. He's so happy with her. Zevin looked at me seriously. "Lyra, you deserve to feel safe and respected around your family. Don't just brush this off." I knew he was right, but I dreaded the thought of confronting Merrick about it. So I let things slide, hoping Sable's behavior would change. But it didn't. It only got worse. She started interfering in my relationship with Merrick, deleting messages he sent to me or conveniently forgetting to tell me about family events. I felt like she was erasing me from his life, piece by piece. Then came the day at the family gathering, where I unknowingly sat in her chair. That one simple action was enough to send her into a fit of anger. When she slapped me, I felt like everything I'd held back came crashing down. I decided I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I was ready to involve the police, to stand up for myself and make sure she faced consequences. But before the police could arrive, something happened. Something that turned my plan for revenge into a moment of reflection. I was beginning to feel like I was losing my brother, and the worst part was that I didn't know how to stop it. Things finally came to a breaking point during another family dinner at our parents' house. I arrived early to help set up, wanting to make things smooth and enjoy some family time. As everyone gathered, I found a chair and sat down, not thinking much of it. Then Sable walked in and froze when she saw me in that chair. Her face twisted with anger. "Excuse me, that's my seat," she snapped. I blinked, confused. "I didn't realize there was a specific spot for you," I replied. Her eyes narrowed, and suddenly the whole room felt tense. "It's always been my spot. You should know that by now." Her voice was full of irritation, and everyone else was staring, probably as uncomfortable as I was. My heart raced, and I tried to keep calm, feeling the pressure of everyone watching. "It's just a chair, Sable. Let's not make this a big deal," I said, hoping to keep things light. Even Merrick, trying to help, spoke up, "Come on, let's not make a scene." But Sable didn't back down. "No, Lyra is always trying to take everything from me. She's always trying to steal my spotlight." Her accusation felt like a punch, and I could feel my cheeks flushing. "I'm not trying to take anything," I said, my voice soft and uncertain. I was just trying to sit down like everyone else, but before I could say much more, the tension in the room seemed to explode. I knew this moment would change everything in our family, and I realized I had to deal with it not just for me, but for Merrick too. I felt like a storm was building inside of me, ready to finally break free. After the dinner, things got chaotic. My mind kept spinning with Sable's harsh words, accusing me of trying to take everything from her. Family had always been my safe place, a space I felt supported and loved. Now it felt like it was turning into a battleground, and I didn't know why. Later, Merrick reached out to me with a text that read, "Can we talk? Sable feels terrible about last night." I sighed, guessing he was trying to keep the peace, as he always did. I wanted to respond with something sharp, but instead I replied, "Sure, I'd like to talk too."
We met at a park that weekend.
It was a sunny day, but I felt weighed down by the situation. Merrick walked over, looking nervous, his brow creased with worry. "Lyra, I'm really sorry about what happened last night. Sable didn't mean for it to go that far," he said, looking like he wanted me to forgive her right away. I looked at him, struggling to put my feelings into words. "Merrick, it's not just about the chair. It's how she treats me. The things she says, they're hurtful." I wanted him to see the full picture, to understand why this wasn't just a small issue to me. Merrick sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I know she can be intense, but you have to understand, she's been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe it would be better if we all just tried to avoid conflict." A surge of disappointment washed over me. "Merrick, avoiding it won't make it go away. I feel like she's pushing me out of your life, and I don't want that." Merrick's eyes softened, but I could see he was torn between me and Sable. "I'll talk to her," he promised. "Just give it some time." Days turned into weeks, and things didn't improve. In fact, Sable seemed even more aggressive, especially at family gatherings. One afternoon, at a barbecue, she slid up next to me with a smirk. "So, Lyra still single? You must be really picky," she said, her tone dripping with fake sympathy. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I tried to stay calm. "I'm just focused on my career right now, Sable," I replied, hoping to end the conversation. "Right, because that's working out so well for you," she shot back, laughing in a way that felt like nails scraping across a chalkboard. It was as if she wanted me to feel small and uncomfortable. After that, I started confiding in Zevin, my best friend, more and more. I felt lost, desperate for someone to help me make sense of this situation. One evening at our favorite coffee shop, The comforting smell of coffee filled the air as I stirred my drink absent-mindedly, spilling my frustrations to him. It's like I'm walking on eggshells around her, I told him, feeling exhausted. I feel like anything I say or do sets her off. Zevin looked at me, his face serious with concern. Have you ever thought about looking into her past? There might be a reason for her behavior, he suggested. I hesitated, not sure how far I wanted to go with this. My mind raced with doubts, but I also knew I couldn't keep living like this, feeling like I was losing my brother and my family to this constant tension. I felt uneasy about digging into Sable's past. It seemed like an invasion of privacy, and I was worried it might just make things worse. Sometimes, you need to understand the enemy to defend yourself, Zevin replied, his voice steady and firm. His determination radiated toward me, and, reluctantly, I began to consider the possibility. After a lot of inner conflict, I decided to look into Sable's past. It didn't take long before I found some troubling information online. I uncovered mentions of toxic relationships and even a few restraining orders filed against her by former partners. My heart pounded as I read through these details. Who was this person my brother had chosen to marry? Feeling both anxious and resolute, I decided to share what I'd found with Zevin. She has a past that worries me, I told him. This might explain why she's acting this way. Zevin's face grew serious as he took it all in. Lyra, you need to confront Merrick with this information. He deserves to know who he's really dealing with. That evening, I finally found the courage to invite Merrick over for dinner. I wanted it to feel like old times, hoping the familiar warmth of our shared meals might ease the tension. When he arrived, I noticed the stress lines on his face, as if he'd been carrying a heavy burden. Thanks for coming, Merrick. I made your favorite, chicken Alfredo, I said, smiling and trying to lighten the mood. Thanks, Lyra. It smells great, he replied, but I could see the worry etched in his eyes. Once we sat down at the table, I took a deep breath, knowing this conversation could change everything. Merrick, I need to talk to you about Sable again, I began, trying to keep my voice calm. His face darkened slightly. I thought we agreed to let things cool down, he replied, sounding tired. I wish we could just leave it, I admitted. But I found out some things about her that really worry me. I don't think you fully understand who she is. I pressed forward, steadying my voice as best as I could. What do you mean? He asked, concern flashing across his face. I laid everything out, the toxic relationships, the restraining orders, and even the ways she'd been interfering in my own life. She's been sabotaging my career, Merrick. She's spreading rumors about me to my clients. I can't let her hurt you too. Merrick's expression shifted as he took in the weight of my words. He looked torn and a bit overwhelmed. This is a lot to process, Lyra. I don't know what to think, he muttered, his voice shaking slightly. But before he could say more, there was a loud, sudden knock at the door. My heart raced as we exchanged a worried glance. Who could that be? He asked, tension creeping into his voice. I don't know, I replied, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I sensed something bad was about to happen. As Merrick opened the door, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Standing there was Sable, her face flushed with both anger and, surprisingly, a hint of fear. My heart sank as she pushed past Merrick, completely ignoring me. Merrick, we need to talk. Now, she demanded, her voice filled with urgency. Merrick glanced back at me, unsure. We were in the middle of a conversation, he said hesitantly. Sable whipped around to face me, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. You've been filling his head with lies, haven't you, Lyra? My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. That's not true, Sable. I'm just trying to protect him. Protect him? She sneered, her voice dripping with bitterness as she stepped closer. You mean keep him all to yourself, right? I know your type, Lyra. Enough. Merrick interrupted, his voice unsteady as he tried to regain control of the situation. Sable, let's not do this right now. But Sable wasn't backing down. Oh, I think we need to, she snapped. You're so busy listening to her nonsense. You don't even see what's really going on here. The tension was thick in the air, and I tried my best to stay calm. Sable, I'm not trying to come between you two. I just want both of you to be happy. She scoffed, crossing her arms tightly. Happy? You think you can just waltz in and dictate how our relationship should be? I'm not about to let you control our lives. I'm not trying to control anything, I replied, my voice trembling. I'm just concerned for you both. Sable stepped even closer, her voice dropping to a low, venomous growl. You think you're better than me, don't you? With your perfect job, your perfect life? Well, I'm tired of it. Her words hit like a slap, filled with so much bitterness and resentment. It was as if every suppressed emotion she had was boiling over in that moment. Merrick looked torn, glancing from me to Sable, uncertain of what to do or say. And as I stood there, facing her anger and feeling the tension from every direction, I realized that this confrontation was only the beginning. The cracks in our family were deepening, and I wasn't sure if we could find a way to fix them. I had never once thought of myself as being superior to Sable. I just wanted to be supportive, to be part of the family we were building together. I'm not trying to put you down, Sable. I want us to be a family, I said, feeling my heart race as I tried to stay calm. But Sable leaned in, her eyes fierce and filled with anger. Family? You're a threat to everything I've worked for. You've been trying to tear us apart since day one, she hissed. A surge of anger bubbled up in me. I have never tried to tear you two apart. I just want my brother to be safe, I replied, my voice shaking. But before I could finish, Sable's face twisted with rage. In a sudden, shocking move, she slapped me hard across the face. The sound of her slap echoed in the room, and I stumbled back, stunned by both the pain and the shock of what had just happened. Merrick's eyes widened in disbelief. Sable, what the hell? He shouted, clearly shocked. I touched my cheek, feeling the sting radiate through my body. Tears welled up, but I fought to hold them back. You can't just hit me and expect everything to be okay, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and anger. Sable took a step back, her expression shifting from rage to something that almost looked like regret. I didn't mean to, she mumbled, but her voice lacked sincerity. No, you meant it, I shot back, my frustration finally boiling over. You've been manipulating everything and everyone around you. Merrick looked between us, his face a mix of confusion, concern, and anger. This is not okay, Sable. You can't treat Lyra like this, he said, his voice firm. The tension in the room was thick, but I felt a small wave of relief that Merrick was finally standing up. But as I looked at Sable, I could see how deeply broken this situation had become. Her face grew cold, and her voice took on an icy tone. I'm done with this, she said suddenly. You think you can just come in here and ruin my life? You're nothing but a spoiled brat. Enough, Merrick shouted, his voice booming. I can't believe this is happening. I thought we could work through our issues, but you've crossed a line, Sable. His voice shook with a mix of anger and disappointment. The weight of the moment settled over us like a dark cloud. I realized then that this fight had gone beyond just Sable and me. It was tearing apart the very fabric of our family, and I wasn't sure if anything could fix it. Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air outside, and my heart began to pound. A police car had pulled up in front of the house. I felt my stomach drop as I processed what was happening. What's going on? Sable asked, her voice shifting from anger to panic. Merrick turned to her, his face filled with disappointment. I don't know, but it looks like someone must have called about the altercation, he said, his tone heavy with regret. As the police officers approached the door, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. The situation had spiraled far beyond anything I'd ever imagined, and all I could do was brace myself for what was about to unfold. The reality of what had happened was sinking in, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. One of the officers stepped inside, his expression serious. Ma'am, we received a report of an altercation. Can you tell us what happened? He asked, looking directly at Sable. Sable's face shifted as she looked at the officer, a hint of panic creeping into her eyes. I didn't do anything, she stammered, her voice trembling. I just had a disagreement with her. A disagreement? Merrick cut in, frustration boiling over. You slapped my sister across the face. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions growing more serious. We'll need to take a statement from everyone involved, one of the officers said. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Sable has been aggressive toward me for a while now. This isn't the first incident, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Merrick looked at me, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and regret. Lyra, I didn't want it to come to this. I thought we could work things out. Clearly, that's not going to happen, I replied, feeling a rush of mixed emotions. Part of me wanted to protect my brother, to spare him the pain, but another part of me needed him to understand just how serious this was. As the officers took our statements, I could feel Sable's anger simmering beneath the surface. She glared at me, her voice dripping with bitterness. You're ruining my life. You think you're the good sister, but you're just jealous, she spat, her eyes filled with resentment. Jealous? I replied, my heart pounding. I just want you to be honest with yourself and with Merrick. Once we'd finished giving our accounts, the officers stepped aside to discuss the situation among themselves. The tension in the room was palpable as we waited, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I could see Merrick's face, torn between loyalty to Sable and the truth he was finally beginning to see. Sable stood there, her hands clenched, her face a mixture of anger and fear. As we waited for the officers to decide on the next steps, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This wasn't how I had ever imagined my family would be. I had hoped for a sister-in-law who would bring us closer, not one who would tear us apart. But standing there, with the weight of the past few months pressing down on me, I knew there was no turning back. This night had unraveled everything I thought I knew about my brother and his wife, and as the officers returned to us, I braced myself for whatever was to come. The family we once were was gone, and I wasn't sure if we could ever find our way back. I took a moment to speak quietly to Merrick, my voice soft but serious. Merrick, you have to see how toxic she is. I'm really worried about you. He ran a hand through his hair, looking torn and uncertain. I know things have been difficult, but I love her, Lyra. I just need some time to think, he said, his voice almost pleading. Before I could respond, the officers returned. Ma'am, one of them said, looking directly at Sable, we are placing you under arrest for assault. What? You can't do this. Sable shouted, her voice rising in pitch. Desperate. It's just a misunderstanding. She continued to protest as the officers cuffed her and began to lead her away. I watched her go, feeling a complex mix of relief and sadness. This was a turning point I hadn't imagined, but maybe it was the only way forward. I glanced at Merrick, and his face was pale, clearly shaken. I could see the weight of everything crashing down on him. I can't believe this is happening, he whispered, his voice unsteady. I know it's hard, I said gently, trying to reach him. But you have to understand, her behavior isn't just a phase. She's been manipulating you, Merrick. She's been pushing me out of your life. The gravity of the moment settled around us as the police car drove away, with Sable inside. A strange sense of finality washed over me, almost as if a heavy door had closed on this chapter. The woman who once seemed so charming had become a source of chaos, and now she was gone. The weeks that followed were intense and filled with challenges. Sable faced serious consequences for her actions. She was charged with assault and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. I watched the toll this took on Merrick. He was left grappling with a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. We spent countless hours talking through everything that had happened, slowly piecing together the signs of her manipulation that he'd missed. As we processed it all, he began to understand just how deeply she had affected our family and his own sense of self. Throughout this period, Zevin was always by my side, offering support and comfort. His presence made all the difference, and his calm strength helped me heal. One evening, as we sat together in my apartment, he took my hand. You're incredibly strong, Lyra. I'm proud of how you stood up for yourself, he said, his voice full of warmth. Thank you, Zevin, I replied, feeling gratitude swell inside me. I couldn't have done it without you. Reflecting on everything, I realized I had learned some deeply valuable lessons about love, loyalty, and the importance of standing up for myself. I had faced a toxic situation head-on, and I emerged stronger and more resilient than I'd ever imagined. Looking out over the Dallas skyline from my apartment window, I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. I knew I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I now had the strength to protect myself and the people I loved from toxic influences. Life was mine to shape, and I was finally ready to move forward, feeling empowered, confident, and prepared to start a new chapter, one that was truly my own.